Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
What's up, Patriots? Welcome to the CG Patriot Podcast, Awake with Reason. Today is March 14th, 2021. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe below. Take a look at some of my videos in the description as well. Following up on the video I did yesterday in regards to discussing Nesara Gesara, I know I had mentioned that I'd go over it in more detail with you guys, and that's what I'm going to do today. The video is not going to be all too long. Coincidentally, I found a video that is by the none other than 107. I'm not going to say his full name. So you guys know who that is, and it was actually featured, the first video that was featured on beforeitsnews.com. So I'll put that link in the description below as well. But I wanted to go through this. It's got some really good hints of what is in store for us, the history behind Nesara Gesara a little bit, and how that's going to relate to what we're going to talk about today. All right, guys, let's get into it.
That's when everything is restored. In the rest year, in the Jubilee year, if people had sold off, if your ancestors had sold off property that was, an inheritance to your family, it was restored to the original owners in that rest year. So that, say you had parents or grandparents that sold off, essentially leased off, if you will, property that was to your particular tribe or family in a tribe, then it was restored to you in the Jubilee year. And so you didn't have to live with the consequences of a bad decision by your ancestors in your bloodline. You could still be restored those properties for you to be able to make the right decisions, do the right things, build out. Now, somebody sold a property or leased it out and got a good amount of money. Maybe they did something else with it commerce-wise, started a blacksmith shop or something, that made money with that money. And so it wasn't a bad decision, but, you had, people make decisions for all sorts of reasons. But if you got the benefit or if you didn't, those original properties were restored to the original family. So, for example, native tribes across the country, they don't sell native property. They will lease them out on long-term leases, 50 or 100 years. And then when the lease expires, the property goes back to the tribe, and any developments on the property are included usually, so that they don't lose their inheritance. They can sell the value of it for a season, but it's not lost to the family forever. And it makes a lot more sense longer term for families. So in the Jubilee year, all the properties were restored to the original families. Here in America, in reality, our birthright has been stolen, frauded away from us, given away, having to do with how we control the right to print money to foreign entities, these Federal Reserve banks, this right to tax us to death, some kind of a bankruptcy thing that's gone on with our Social Security and all sorts of other things.
That's what we touched on last night in the video last night. It was, if you haven't seen that, it'll be in the description below. But I talked about how your Social Security number has been pretty much hijacked, and your Social Security number is property of the United States of America, making you property of the United States of America. All right, let's get back into it.
And we've lived with the consequences of it all of our lives, Jaco, everybody in this audience. And so is there some kind of a financial reset that's coming. Is that part of what's going on here? Remember last year, at the beginning of this whole COVID thing, after interest rates have been moved down, down, down.
And the reset, like we discussed before, is the good one, not the bad one, not the one that you see in Times Magazine that the DS is trying to push. So just so you don't get those confused.
Down, down by the Federal Reserve because commerce was in trouble. Then at a certain point, when it was nearly zero on, it's 0.25% or something, the Federal Reserve interest rate, then President Trump moved the supervisory authority, the decision-making authorities of the Federal Reserve back under direct authority of the Treasury, of Mnuchin, and who himself answers directly to the president. So
we talked about that last night too, in regards to, actually I think it was 2 videos ago, might be the Vatican video, about how the Treasury absorbed the Federal Reserve.
So those actions, those operations were no longer done by the Federal Reserve Board, which, by the way, is all Jesuit. That's a whole nother story in and of itself, but you just take that to the bank.
Thank you.
Take it to the bank.
Yeah.
So there's ahead and go over. Let's go over Nesara Gesara. If you wonder why I hold those headphones, I don't like wearing them, and it allows me to hear the video that's on screen without the echo going on. So fun little fact there. So how you guys doing this weekend? Good? All right. I can't believe it's already March. Literally it's been a year since all this stuff went down. Or a little bit over a year, right? By the way, yeah, I just want to reconfirm you can get that link on Before It's News, and I'll put that link to the 107 interview with Jaco in the description below. Okay. So let's get into a little bit of the history of Nesara Gesara, okay? So let's get into a little bit more of the history of Nesara Gesara, or the Nesara Act, National Economic Security and Reform Act. And I will put this link to this particular document and all the ones that we discussed today in the description below, okay? So it starts with, this change began in the mid-1970s when the Federal Land Bank illegally foreclosed on farmers' mortgages all throughout the Midwest. In each of these cases, the farmers were defrauded by the banks with the approval of the Federal Reserve, okay? Keep that in mind. These court cases eventually became known as the Farmer Claims Program. So there's a history to this that goes all the way back to the 70s, okay? And you'll see how this progresses into the different decades leading up to what most say is was going to be the release of, I'll get into it in a minute. Let's go through this, and then you'll be up to speed a little bit more, and then we can get into what occurred back in 2001. So in 1978, an elderly ranch farmer in Colorado purchased a farm with loan from the Federal Land Bank. After he died, the property was passed on to his son, Roy, who was a retired military general. Soon after, the Federal Land Bank officer and federal marshal appeared on his property and informed him the bank was foreclosing on his farm and to vacate within 30 days. Without his knowledge, his deceased father signed a stipulation which reverted the property back to the Federal Land Bank in the event of the borrower's death. Roy filed a class action lawsuit in the Denver federal court system, but the case didn't go very far, and the suit was dismissed by filing incorrectly. Of course it was. This began Roy's investigation into the inner workings of the banking system. In 1982, he was given a contract by the U.S. Senate and later Supreme Court to investigate banking fraud, but because he was under a strict non-disclosure order, he was not allowed to tell the media what he discovered. In the late 80s, he began sharing his knowledge with others, including high-ranking military personnel who helped him bring about a class action lawsuit lawsuit against the federal government. So this is when it gets interesting, right? So it goes on and it talks about how they brought the lawsuit to the government. Eventually, there were 23 other farmers and ranchers and Indians swindled by the banks in the same manner, so they filed a joint case. And it goes on to how that case actually goes through the legal system, okay? And then it eventually gets approved. Okay? All right, so this is where it gets a little squirrely, okay? You remember this date, right? It was September 1/1/2001, okay? I don't want to get triggered with YouTube on that date. I don't know how they react to that. So the next step is to announce Nesara to the world, but it's not an easy task to do. Many powerful groups have tried to prevent the implementation of Nesara. So the story goes is that what occurred on that day back in 2001 was that and you can read the rest of this as well, was, from what I understand, is that the BUSH family decided to counter the release of Nesara Gesara. And what they did was what they did, which was, how do I say it without using keywords? You know exactly what happened on September 11th, okay? So that was the time they tried to release this. They tried to, it was a hush hush behind, this is from what I've heard, it was behind the scenes. A lot of Congress, Senate knew. Apparently they signed documents that would not allow them to talk about this. So, NDAs and all that kind of stuff, non-disclosures. So that's how the story goes. So that gives you a little bit of that background of that story. There's far more detail to it. I'll put this link in the description below so you guys can check it out, all right? But I want to go into the details of Nesara Gesara and how that applies to where we're at currently, okay? And this kicks back to what Juan 107 was talking about, okay? All right, so there's a few different places that you can get the Nesara Gesara list in between 18 and 20. Sometimes there are 15. So I'm just referring to one of them. If this one is not the one that you've heard of, or it's the one that you've referenced or been read to by somebody else about, my apologies. There are a couple different variations, but they're all extremely similar in regards to the overall theme of Nesara Gesara, okay? So number 1, cancels all credit card, mortgage, and other bank debt due to illegal banking and government activities. May be referred to as the Jubilee. So we heard that Jubilee in the video we watched at the beginning of this show. So that brings this back to what we're talking about here, okay? Or complete forgiveness of debt. It abolishes income tax. So we saw that Trump was doing that. Part of the COVID relief was to abolish income tax for certain thresholds of income, right? So we've already seen a little bit of that. Number 3, abolishes the IRS, with employees of the IRS being transferred into the U.S. Treasury. Okay? So where do we hear that the Federal Reserve was transferred into the Treasury? So it makes kind of sense, right? Number 3. Number 4, creates a 17% flat rate. There's that number. Others I've seen that said 14. So it's 14 to 17, somewhere around there, okay? So it creates a 17% flat rate, non-essential new items, only sales tax revenue for the government. So this will be the only sales tax revenue, will be the only revenue for the government, okay? In other words, food and medicine will not be taxed. Nor will used items such as old homes. Number 5, it increases benefits to senior citizens. That's a huge one, right? They're messing around with people's Social Security like forever on that one, and I know that there was a years ago, and more recent too. They talk about canceling Social Security, and you've paid all this money into it, right? And the next thing you know, where'd that money go? Poof, it's gone. Number 6, returns constitutional law to all courts in legal matters. So that's a big one. That's a big one. That's what you're seeing going on right now. Okay, it's exactly what's going on right now, and exactly the issues that we're having with the election. Number 7, reinstates the original title of nobility amendment. Number 8, establishes new presidential and congressional elections within 20 days of Gesara's announcement. All right. The interim government will cancel all national emergencies and return us back to constitutional law. And we're currently still in a national emergency. Literally, we've been in a national emergency for over a year now. Okay, and from what I've heard, it's part of the bigger plan. This whole lockdown was utilized by, the white hats. They knew it was coming, but they used it for the benefit of rolling this out, okay, and weeding out the evil throughout the government. Monitors elections and prevents illegal election activities in special interest groups. Creates a new U.S. Treasury rainbow currency backed by gold. So that's what we discussed yesterday. Gold, silver, and platinum, precious metals. Basically ending the bankruptcy of the United States initiated by Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. So that's what got us into this big mess, okay? They tried to, well, they did. They basically were confiscating people's gold, and they were putting us on a complete fiat fake currency, and that's what we've really been, subjected to since 1933. And then you also saw with JFK that prior to his assassination, that they were also trying to get us back on the, or get us back to currency backed by gold. Okay, so it's a really touchy subject with the DS. Let's just say that. Forbids the sale of American birth certificate records as chattel property bonds. So exactly what we were talking about yesterday, right, guys? So your Social Security is assigned to you when you're born, or if you have assumed residency and gone through the process of being a legal immigrant here. Not illegal, legal immigrant. And so that birth certificate, as well as the Social Security number, is basically owned by the U.S., okay? Initiates new U.S. Treasury banking system in alignment with constitutional law. We've already kind of touched on that, okay? Eliminates the Federal Reserve System. During the transition period, the Federal Reserve will be allowed to operate side by side the U.S. Treasury for 1 year in order to remove all Federal Reserve notes from the money supply. What did we see recently? The Federal Reserve System went down, right? And I need to do a little bit more digging. I don't believe it's ever gone down like that before. If you've seen it and you have an article or you have a video, you can send me. Go ahead and put it in the comments below. I'll check it out. Restores financial privacy. That's a big one, guys. Think about. It's interesting because when I owned a business, I was leveraged on my credit cards for business, right? So I had, I was an easy target, okay? And literally every other month, one of those credit cards was getting jacked. Basically, it was being utilized for, the number somehow got on the internet. That privacy was obviously not, not met with the companies that I was purchasing items from, and that goes along with the whole credit score company that I think it was something like 50 million or something crazy. There was a ton of data that got stolen out of one of the biggest credit reporting agencies in the world. You can look that up as well, and that's the crazy part. And it happened right around that time. So that restores financial privacy, retrains all judges and attorneys in constitutional law. Okay, ceases all aggressive U.S. government military actions worldwide. This was a big one, guys. We did this, or Trump did this, throughout his first presidency. You know? So, establishes peace throughout the world. You know, how many articles did we need to see about what they did in the Middle East? I mean, it is unbelievable what the Trump administration, you know, what they did in the 4 years they were there. Unheard of. And this is a super biblical, these two things, right? And it's interesting that 17, I'll just point that out, establishes peace throughout the world. 18, releases unprecedented prosperity with enormous sums of money for humanitarian purposes. That's a big one. You know, that's the one that I was talking about the other day. And there are certain folks that, you know, that believe in certain ways this is going to kind of go down. The person that I hate to call him an influencer, but the person that I watch that is connected to this, as far as I know, is Charlie Ward. So if you go to Charlie Ward's site on BitChute, and I'll put that link in the description below, he can give you a far more detailed idea of what this entails. But this is awesome. This is basically rooting out all of the poverty in the world. It's one of those things that you never thought would ever happen, right? So, enables the release of over 6,000 patents of suppressed technology that are being withheld from the public under the guise of national security, including free energy devices, anti-gravity, and sonic healing machines. So you might have heard of med beds. Apparently, it sounds like those are going to be coming out this year. And from what Charlie Ward has said is that they already have some of those med beds in Texas, in Florida, and also in Europe, just waiting for this to be triggered or some things to be ironed out to allow these beds to be utilized, okay? And that's huge, guys. I mean, we're talking about the end of disease, the end of, you know, cures for cancer, you know, all of these things that we're subjected to in our food supply, in the air, in the water. All of these things are not necessary and shouldn't have been allowed, obviously, to be done in such a nefarious way to us over these years. And I can go into another video about that, but it's incredible of what they've been subjecting us to, you know. So this is an extreme, and these are all, if you look up some of these patents, they're all on, you know, Google Patents website. You can look up, if you look up certain detailed keywords for 0-point energy, you can find these, right? And they're there. The crazy part is we never looked because we never thought they were real. And they're there. So I can share maybe a couple of those links below in the description as well. Okay, 20. Eliminates all current and future nuclear-powered weaponry on the planet. We don't need nuclear power. 0-point energy exists. You know, Tesla had that back in, you know, the early 1900s. And we know about that Tesla connection to the Trump administration and Trump and his uncle. So it's a whole nother story. But, you know, this is just unnecessary. We don't need nuclear power. It's archaic, okay, guys? So that is the rundown of the Global Economic Security and Reform Act, okay? I'll put this link in the description below, and so you can check that out. I wanted to show you something I ran across today. I was looking for some Nesara Gesara information, and this was the original video that I discussed seeing when I heard about RV, Nesara Gesara, and the what was going on last year and this year, right? So this is old school. It's obviously not allowed on YouTube anymore. And so this was the Nesara Gesara, how it works, explained with Jack Kidd and Charlie Ward. So synchronicity, I came across that and probably the second link that I got. And this was the exact video, but you can't get to it. So I'm going to see if I can find that original one. It might be on his website. So, all right, guys. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to give you an overview of what Nesara Gesara was, give you the resources and the links to be able to check that out for yourself. You know, I wanted to end with this, guys. We're at a point where we are absolutely, in my opinion, and this is my intuition speaking, out of all the research I've done and the hours that I've put in, we are at a point in history where the tides are changing and we'll get to the freedom that we seek. And it's interesting because we say freedom, somebody says you're free, that's not awake, and then you show them all the things that I just showed you and talked about, right? Your social security number, you're owned by the U.S. You know, you're put into a system. It's the way that the DS does it. They trick you into a system that makes you believe that you have a choice, okay, and that you ultimately give your consent to them in many different forms, in many different ways, and that's the only way they can function. They can only function if you give them your consent. So, you know, that's one of the things that I had to wrap my head around earlier this past year. Is where have I given my power away? And it was something I had to really think about. Because I believed that we were free, right? And then, you know, this thing showed up on our door. You know, the CV-19 showed up on our door last year around this time. And that definitely shook the tree for me. You know, the fight showed up directly on my doorstep. And, you know, I knew it was possibly not what it was, and my gut instinct was correct. But that definitely brought the DS directly to my doorstep, okay? And since then, I've been able to go down this path of understanding exactly what they've subjected us to, you know, over these past years, you know, forever. And it goes all the way back to the Bible. It goes all the way back. All right, thanks for joining me today, guys. Have a great weekend. I'm going to get a little bit more into some videos this week in regards to, you know what, I'm not too sure about what topic I'm going to pick. If you have a topic that you want me to touch on, let me know. Put it in the comments below. I'll take a look and see if I've got any information on that. I've got information on a wide variety of things. I am not an expert at any of them, but I do know a little bit about a lot. So, and again, those are all my opinions, but I can give you the information. You can take those breadcrumbs of information and do your research. I highly suggest you do it. Question everything that I say, because that's the only way we're ever going to get out of this mental trap that we're in without questioning everything. Even me, right? Question everything. Question yourself. You know, when you wake up in the morning, is this the, you know, is the information you're bringing into your sphere the correct information you should be doing? And does it resonate with you in your heart spiritually? And that's kind of how I wake up every day and how I gauge my moral compass. So, all right, guys. Thanks for your support. I'll talk to you soon. Stay frosty.